On this day in 1889, Celtic played Third Lanark in their first ever Scottish Cup final appearance in what became known as the Snow Final. The newly formed Celtic Football Club immediately secured the services of some of the best Catholic players in the country in 1888, although it must be said, in this age of shamateurism, they were attracted as much by the rule-bending financial inducements offered as by any wish to see the new club do well. The newspapers of the day were soon noting with surprise the number of publicans who were turning out in the Celtic ranks. With the calibre of player at Celtic, they immediately became one of the leading clubs in Scotland and stormed their way to the Scottish Cup final at their first attempt, scoring 36 goals and conceding 7 in 7 matches, including a 9-2 win over Clyde in the semi-final. The Glasgow Evening Post wrote on the 1st of February 1889, "The football interest of the country is centred in the great final which takes place tomorrow. It is the all-absorbing topic of conversation and, sad to relate, betting is being very freely indulged in over the result." Immediately after the semi-finals, the Celts were strong in public favour, but since then the Volunteers have come a bit and there is scarcely a shade of difference at the present moment in the public mind as to the winner. The paper also alluded to the effect Celtic's Irish Catholic character would have on the attendance. "There is a spice too of national and ecclesiastic sentiment connected with the doings of one of the finalists, and this should tend to make the crowd all the larger." The match was played at the second Hampden Park, later renamed Hampden Park after Third Lanark moved in when Queen's Park moved to the site of the present Hampden in 1903. Snow was already falling on the morning of the match, but it did little to dampen enthusiasm. The Glasgow Evening Post reporting on the 2nd of February 1889, "As early as 12:30, little knots of people had congregated around the precincts of Hampden, and these awaited the opening of the gates amid blinding snow and piercing wind. At 2:30 p.m, the traffic was at its height, and the scene, had the day been fine, would have been an exceedingly novel and interesting one. The crowd within an hour of the start numbered fully 10,000, the Irish face and character being very strongly en evidence. The people passed into the ground in the full belief that they were going to see a cup tie, but most of the people about the pavilion had a doubt about the point." With the pitch by now covered in a thick blanket of snow, Celtic and Third Lanark officials met in the pavilion and agreed that the cup final should not go ahead, but with a record crowd of 15,000 already in the ground, the match should still go ahead as a friendly. This, though, did not settle the matter. The Glasgow Evening Post reported, "The committees of both clubs advised their players to play a friendly game, but the referee, Mr Charles Campbell, and the umpires, together with other members of the SFA committee, decided that they could not recognise this and decided that the tie must be played. There was no other course open to the latter gentlemen, but the whole matter will come before the association proper, the ultimate tribunal. The veriest tyro who saw the field, of course, knows that the ground was thoroughly and absolutely unplayable." Celtic lined up for their first ever Scottish Cup final. John Kelly, Gallagher, McKeown, W. Maley, James Kelly, McLaren, McCallum, Dunbar, Groves, Coleman, T. Maley. In atrocious conditions, Celtic laid siege to the Third Lanark goal, but could not find a way through, and fell behind to a 20th minute sucker punch. The Glasgow Evening Post reported that day, "All the play and no luck was what the Celts were having." Third scored again on 55 minutes, the Glasgow Herald of the 4th of February writing, "Young Oswald scored the second goal for the Volunteers. Kelly tried to catch the ball, but it slipped through, and no wonder, for it was completely covered with snow." Celtic's lack of enthusiasm to claw back the deficit had many in the crowd suspecting the match was not for the cup, and thousands began to drift away as the snow continued to fall. Thirds added a third in the final seconds. The custom then was for the president of the winning team to receive the cup at a banquet later that evening, rather than being handed to the winning captain at the end of the match. Over 120 gentlemen sat down at the Alexandra Hotel in Bath Street that evening with the Scottish Cup trophy on prominent display, but it was not presented. The Scottish referee reported on the 4th of February 1889. Owing to a protest coming from the committees of both teams before entering the field, Mr. Crerar remarked that he was not in a position to hand over the cup, which was on the table, to the winners, as the referee and umpires were not in favour of a friendly match, but still accepting the protest, which will be duly considered by the SFA committee during the week. After Joseph Shaughnessy toasted the health of Third Lanark, a Mr. Brown of Third Lanark responded with a toast to Celtic, and, according to the Scottish referee, remarked that he would far rather see the cup won in a fair and square way by either team. Shaughnessy was also quoted in the Scottish referee. "I do not know how some people look on the final tie as being a struggle between Scotland and Ireland, because a goodly number of the Celtic team never saw Ireland, and, still more, in the Celtic team there are some good and true Highland men." It's to Third Lanark's great credit that they stood by their protest in the aftermath of their win, which left the SFA with no choice but to order a replay. Celtic had no better luck second time around, and they were denied a fairy tale Scottish Cup win in their first season when Third Lanark won 2-1 to lift the cup for their first time the following Saturday.